They gave my sister the money my grandmother left me, every single dollar of it. And when I found out, my mother looked me dead in the eyes and said, "She needed it more than you did." That was the moment I stopped being a daughter and started being a witness. And trust me, what I watched happen next was something I never could have scripted. But before I tell you how their carefully built world came apart piece by piece, drop a comment and tell me what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? And one more thing. Have you ever had something that was truly yours taken away and handed to someone else, just because you were the one who never complained? I'll be waiting. My name is Claire. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a nurse. I'm the kind of person who shows up early, stays late, and never asks for recognition. My mother used to call that being easy. What she really meant was that I was easy to overlook. My sister Dana is 4 years younger than me. She's always been the one who filled every room she walked into. Loud, dramatic, beautiful, in a way that made strangers stop and stare. Growing up, I used to think that was just who she was. I didn't understand until much later that she had been carefully taught to believe the world owed her an audience. Our mother raised us alone after our father left when I was 9. Dana was 5. I barely remember the version of our family that had him in it, but I do remember the version that came after the one where I quietly became the second adult in the house while still being a child. I cooked dinner when my mother worked nights. I helped Dana with homework. I signed my own permission slips for field trips because no one else remembered. I didn't resent it. That's the part that's hard to explain. I just thought that was what love looked like, showing up without being asked. My mother never said she loved Dana more. She didn't have to. It lived in the smaller things, the way she'd drop everything when Dana called, but let my calls go to voicemail. The way Dana's recitals were circled on the calendar, but my nursing school graduation was the weekend my mother decided to take Dana on a trip to Savannah because Dana was going through something. The way every family conversation eventually became about what Dana needed, what Dana deserved, what Dana was going through. I learned to make myself small. Not because I was weak, but because I was watching, and I was patient. And somewhere deep down I believed that the people who love you quietly are the ones who love you the longest. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was different. Grandma Ruth saw me. She used to sit with me on her back porch when I was a teenager and say, "Claire, baby, you're going to be the one who's still standing when the storm passes." I thought she was just being kind. Now I know she was being specific. Grandma Ruth passed away 3 years ago. She had a modest savings account, not a fortune, but real money, the kind she'd built dollar by dollar over 40 years of working as a seamstress. She never owned much, but she saved like the future was something worth preparing for. And in the last year of her life, she told me directly, sitting right there at her kitchen table, holding both my hands, that she wanted me to have it. She said, "You've been carrying this family without a single complaint. This is for your future. Don't let anyone take it from you." She said she would make it official. I trusted her. I shouldn't have trusted the people around her. What I didn't know was that in her final months, when her health declined quickly and she needed more care than any of us expected, my mother became her primary caretaker. My mother handled the paperwork. My mother was in the room for conversations I wasn't invited to. And when Grandma Ruth passed and the estate was settled, I found out not from my mother, not from a lawyer, not from any formal conversation, but from my cousin Marcus, who mentioned it casually at the repast, like he assumed I already knew. The inheritance had been moved. Every dollar of it had gone into an account in my sister Dana's name. My cousin's exact words were, "So Dana got a nice chunk from Grandma Ruth, huh? Your mom must have worked that out. Good for her, I guess." He said it the way people say things they think are common knowledge. He moved on to reach for a piece of cornbread, and I stood there in my grandmother's kitchen, holding a paper plate, feeling the floor shift underneath me. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I set my plate down on the counter, went to the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the edge of the tub, and breathed, in and out, for about 4 minutes. Then I washed my hands, fixed my face, and walked back out. That patience my grandmother always talked about, it finally had a purpose. I waited 3 days before I said anything. I needed to be sure. I called the attorney who had handled my grandmother's estate not to confront anyone, just to understand the paperwork. What he told me was careful and measured, the way lawyers talk when they're trying not to say too much, but the shape of what happened became clear. The original verbal arrangement my grandmother had described to me had not been formalized before her health deteriorated. And in the final months, the beneficiary structure had been updated. Legally, everything was airtight. My mother had not broken any laws. She had just broken something else. I drove to my mother's house on a Saturday morning. I chose Saturday because Dana wouldn't be there. She had a standing brunch thing with her friends that she never missed. I wanted to talk to my mother alone. I wanted to give her the chance to explain, or apologize, or at least acknowledge what had happened before I decided what to do with it. My mother opened the door in her bathrobe, surprised to see me. She smiled the way she does when she's caught off guard, wide, bright, slightly defensive. "Claire, I wasn't expecting you. Come in, I'll put on coffee." I came in. I didn't sit down. I said, "I want to talk about Grandma Ruth's money." The smile didn't disappear immediately. It faded the way color fades from a photograph left in the sun slowly, and then all at once. She turned toward the kitchen, away from me, and said, "There's not much to talk about. You know how estates go. Things are complicated." I said, "Grandma Ruth told me directly that she intended for that money to go to me. She sat across from me at her kitchen table and told me, 'You were in charge of her affairs at the end, and the money went to Dana.'" My mother turned back around. And that's when she said it, the sentence I will never forget for as long as I live. She looked me in the eyes and said, "She needed it more than you did." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I know this wasn't what Grandma wanted." Not even, "I can explain." Just, "She needed it more than you did." I asked what that meant. My mother said Dana had been struggling financially. Her car payments were behind. She'd had some credit card debt. She needed a fresh start. And my mother's exact words, always figured things out. She said it like it was a compliment. Like my entire history of figuring things out on my own, of never asking for help, of being the quiet one, had disqualified me from being considered. The thing about being easy to overlook is that eventually you start to understand what you've been funding. My reliability had been the budget. My silence had been the permission. My self-sufficiency had been the justification. I stood there for a long moment. I wasn't angry yet. Not the hot, immediate kind of angry. What I felt was colder than that, clearer. Like something had finally been named that I'd spent years not being able to put into words. I said, "I want you to know that I understand what happened, and I want you to know that I'm not going to pretend that I don't." I picked up my keys from the table by the door where I'd set them, and I left. I didn't call that week, or the week after. My mother called me twice, not to apologize, I found out, but to tell me that Dana was feeling tension in the family and that I was making things uncomfortable. The focus, even in the attempt at repair, was on how my response was affecting Dana. I stopped answering. What happened over the next several months, I did not plan. I want to be honest about that. I didn't engineer any of it. I just stopped being the net that caught everything when it fell. Dana, it turned out, did not use the inheritance money the way my mother had framed it, as a responsible fresh start. Within 4 months, the car was repossessed anyway. She had bought a different car, newer, more expensive, and hadn't kept up with those payments either. The credit card debt had not been paid off. It had shifted. And with a lump sum now spent on things I can only guess at, she was in a worse position than before. My mother, who had spent years directing family resources toward Dana's crises, was now the one being called at 11 p.m. She was the one being asked for more. She was the one realizing, slowly and painfully, that there is no bottom to a hole that someone has never been asked to fill themselves. My cousin Marcus, the same one who had told me about the inheritance, without realizing what he was revealing, called me one afternoon and said, "Your mama is struggling, Claire. Dana is really putting her through it. I think she needs you." I said, "I love my mother, but I can't be the person who steps in to absorb whatever Dana's consequences are. That's always been my role, and I'm done with it." Marcus was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Yeah, I hear you." What I hadn't expected was the conversation that came from my aunt, my mother's older sister, Aunt Patrice, who called me about 6 months after everything had happened. Aunt Patrice had always been the quiet observer of our family, never interfered, never took sides. She called me and asked if she could come visit, and I said yes. She sat in my apartment and told me something I had not known. She told me that my grandmother, Grandma Ruth, had not only told me she wanted me to have that money, she had told my mother the same thing. Directly. And my mother had not just overseen a shift in documents. She had actively encouraged it, had told my grandmother during a vulnerable stretch of days in the hospital that Dana didn't have anyone looking out for her the way Claire does. She had used my competence as an argument against me. I sat with that for a long time after Aunt Patrice left. There's a particular kind of grief in understanding that the story was never what you thought it was. I had spent years believing my mother loved us both, just differently. What Aunt Patrice helped me see was that my mother's favoritism wasn't passive, it was managed. It was a decision that got renewed, quietly, every time I didn't push back, every time I was fine, every time I figured it out. The inheritance wasn't the wound. It was the proof. I'm not going to tell you I've fully healed from this, because I don't think that's how it actually works. What I can tell you is that I've stopped performing wellness for the benefit of people who have chosen not to look clearly at what they've done. My mother and I are not close right now. That's not a door I've slammed, it's a door I've stopped propping open alone. If she wants to walk through it, she knows what that would require. An honest conversation. A real acknowledgement, not a request for me to make Dana feel better about the outcome. My sister and I don't speak. I don't hate her. I think she's a person who was handed everything and told it was love, and now she's standing in her late 20s with no idea how to stand on her own. That's its own kind of tragedy. But it's not mine to fix. What I kept was myself. My apartment, my career, my savings built slowly and deliberately, the way Grandma Ruth built hers. The way I learned to build things long before I knew that was what I was doing. Grandma Ruth used to say I'd be the one still standing when the storm passed. She was right. I'm standing. Now I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it before you answer. Have you ever been the one in your family who was easy? The one who figured things out, who didn't complain, who got passed over because everyone assumed you'd be fine? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, if it hit somewhere, real, share it with someone who needs to hear it. There are a lot of people out there who have been carrying this quietly, and sometimes the only thing that helps is knowing you are not alone. I'll see you in the next one.